Welcome back to Coffeesodes, everybody. Episode 12 already.
Oh,
We're doing a deep dive today into some really cool research.
yeah.
So if you want to explore further, all the details of these studies that we're going to be talking about are in the episode description.
For sure.
But today's topic is zinc oxide, nanoparticles.
You can call them XenoNPs for short,
Okay.
if you want.
ZNONPs.
And what's so fascinating about these tiny particles is they're showing like incredible potential in agriculture.
So we're talking like nano-sized particles that could revolutionize how we grow food.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Tell me more.
So imagine tiny warriors
Oh, okay.
at the microscopic level,
Mm-hmm.
protecting plants from stress,
Okay.
boosting their growth,
Uh-huh.
and making agriculture more sustainable.
That sounds amazing, but also kind of sci-fi.
Right.
We're talking real science here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got a stack of scientific journal articles that dig into how these ZNO-NPs are made,
Okay.
how they're absorbed by plants, and the amazing effects they have.
So let's unpack this.
Okay.
First, can you remind us why plant stress is such a big deal?
So think about it.
Yeah.
Plants are constantly bombarded with challenges.
Mm-hmm.
There's the obvious ones,
Yeah.
like pests munching on their leaves,
Right.
diseases attacking their roots.
Sure.
But then there's a whole other world of environmental stress.
Okay.
Drought, heat waves, salty soils, even heavy metal contamination.
Oh, wow.
All of these can just wreak havoc on a plant's ability to thrive.
Yeah, and as climate change, these stresses are only getting worse.
Exactly. And that's why finding ways to help plants cope with these challenges,
Yeah.
it's crucial for food security, especially with a growing global population.
Okay, so that's where these ZNO-NPs come in.
That's where they come in.
They're like tiny superheroes for plants.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And the really cool part is there's so many different ways to make these nanoparticles.
Okay, walk me through the option.
Okay, well, some methods are physical, like blasting zinc with a laser to create a vapor that deposits as nanoparticles.
Whoa.
It's called physical vapor deposition, or PVD.
Okay.
There's also ball milling, which is basically using a superpowered grinder
Uh-huh.
to smash zinc oxide powder into nano-sized particles.
Okay, so we got lasers and grinders.
Yeah,
Pretty high tech.
pretty high tech.
What other ways can we make these nanoparticles?
There are also chemical methods,
Okay.
like mixing carefully measured ingredients under specific conditions to create a reaction that forms nanoparticles.
I'm guessing these reactions have some pretty complicated names.
They do. We've got hydrothermal,
Okay.
solvothermal,
Oh.
and precipitation methods.
Wow.
All fancy ways of saying we're controlling chemical reactions
Right.
to get the nanoparticles we want.
But here's where it gets really interesting, right?
Yes.
We can actually make these ZNO-NPs using nature itself.
Yes, and this is where things get truly mind-blowing.
Okay.
We can use tiny organisms like bacteria and fungi to create these nanoparticles for us.
What?
Yeah, it's called microbial synthesis.
Wait, so we can harness the power of microbes to create plant-protecting nanoparticles?
Yes.
How does that even work?
It all comes down to a natural process called biomineralization.
Okay.
Think of it like these microbes are like tiny alchemists.
Yeah.
They can take up zinc from their surroundings and through some amazing biological processes transform it into zinc oxide nanoparticles.
So we're basically recruiting microscopic factories
Yeah.
to produce these plant-saving wonders.
That's a great way to put it.
That's incredible.
It is.
But it gets even wilder, right?
It does.
Because plants themselves can get in on the action.
You're right. Plants can actually be used to synthesize ZNO-NPs too.
Really?
It's called plant-mediated synthesis.
Okay.
And it involves using the plant's own natural compounds to create the nanoparticles.
It's like plants helping themselves.
Exactly.
That's so cool. Okay, so we've got a whole arsenal of ways to make these ZNO-NPs. Now, how do we actually get them into the plants to do their magic?
There are two main ways.
Okay.
Through the roots,
Hmm.
called root application,
Okay,
or by spraying them onto the leaves, which is foliar application.
that makes sense. But plant cells have walls, right?
Right.
How do these tiny nanoparticles actually get inside?
That's a great question. And it turns out size matters.
Okay.
Think of it like this. If the nanoparticle is small enough, it can slip right through the tiny pores in the plant's cell walls.
And if they're not small enough?
Then they need a different strategy.
Okay.
Some larger nanoparticles can trigger the plant to create new, slightly larger pores.
Wow.
Others might take advantage of situations where the cell walls are a bit looser.
Huh.
perhaps due to those reactive oxygen species we mentioned earlier.
Reactive oxygen species,
Yeah,
those are the little sparks that can damage cells, right?
they can be. Yeah.
But they're also involved in helping the nanoparticles get inside.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of how even things that can be harmful in high amounts can play beneficial roles in the right context.
Okay, so we've got our ZNO-NPs inside the plants.
Yes.
Do they just hang out there, or do they undergo some kind of transformation?
That's another key point. The research shows that once inside ZNO-NPs can change their form,
Oh.
they might dissolve into zinc ions, which are readily used by the plant for various functions.
Right.
Or they might bind to organic matter within the plant.
So it's not just about delivering the nanoparticles, it's about understanding how they interact and transform within the plant's system.
Precisely. And that's crucial to figuring out exactly how they work their magic against all those biotic and abiotic stresses we talked about.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
All right.
Let's dive into the amazing ways these ZNO-NPs help plants thrive,
Okay.
starting with those pesky pests.
All right.
What have scientists discovered?
So before we get into how ZNO-NPs protect plants, I want to emphasize the sheer variety of threats these tiny particles can combat.
Okay.
It's not just about one pest or one disease. It's about equipping plants to survive in an increasingly challenging world.
Okay, that's a great point.
Yeah.
It's like we're giving plants a whole new set of tools to deal with whatever nature throws at them.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do ZNO-NPs actually pull it off? What are the mechanisms behind their plant-protecting powers?
So imagine a microscopic battle
Oh.
taking place inside the plant.
Mm-hmm.
On one side, you have the attackers,
Okay,
pests chomping on leaves,
right.
fungi infiltrating roots,
Uh-huh.
or even those invisible enemies like viruses.
Oh, wow.
On the other side, we have our tiny warriors, the ZNO-NPs, disrupting those attacks in some pretty ingenious ways.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Go.
But can we zoom in on that microscopic battlefield?
Yeah.
How do ZNO-NPs actually mess with those pests and pathogens?
Let's start with those pesky insects that love to munch on crops.
Okay.
Some studies have shown that ZNO-NPs can disrupt their life cycles,
Okay.
making it harder for them to reproduce or develop properly.
How?
So imagine a farmer spraying ZNO-NPs on their crops. Suddenly, those spider mites that were wreaking havoc on their plants are having fewer babies, and those pesky pulse beetles that infest stored grains are taking longer to grow.
So the ZNO-NPs are throwing a wrench into the bugs' plans for world domination.
Exactly.
I like that. But what about those microscopic invaders?
Right.
The bacteria and fungi that cause plant diseases? How do ZNO-NPs tackle those?
Think of the cell membrane of a pathogen as its protective shield.
Okay.
Now imagine ZNO-NPs poking tiny holes in that shield,
Okay.
causing leaks and making it hard for the pathogen to function. That's one way these nanoparticles can disrupt those disease-causing microbes.
It's like puncturing their armor
Yeah,
and leaving them vulnerable.
right.
I like that analogy. But I've also heard something about reactive oxygen species, or ROS,
Right.
playing a role.
Yeah.
Can you remind us what those are and how they fit into the picture?
Right, remember those tiny, highly energetic sparks we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
The ones that can damage cells if not controlled? Well, ZNO-NPs can actually generate these ROS, especially when exposed to UV light from the sun.
So it's like the nanoparticles are using sunlight to create these little weapons.
Exactly. And when those ROS are unleashed inside a pathogen, they can cause havoc,
Okay.
damaging its proteins and DNA, ultimately leading to its demise.
It's a microscopic war zone, and the ZNO-NPs are bringing some serious firepower.
Yeah.
But it's not just about direct attacks, right?
Right.
They also boost the plant's own defenses.
You got it. Believe it or not, plants have immune systems.
Wait, hold on.
Just,
Plants have immune systems? I never knew that.
yeah, they do.
So how do ZNO-NPs give them a boost?
So imagine a secret vault inside the plant,
Yeah.
holding blueprints for creating powerful defensive proteins.
I know.
These proteins can fight off infections and keep the plant healthy.
Right.
ZNO-NPs are like master keys unlocking that vault and allowing the plant to build an army of defensive proteins.
So the nanoparticles are basically switching on the plant's natural defenses,
Yeah,
making it more alert and ready to fight off invaders.
exactly.
That's amazing.
It is pretty cool. And that's not all.
There's more.
ZNO-NPs can also stimulate the production of special compounds called phytoalexins.
Fight what?
Phytoalexins.
Okay.
Think of them as the plant's own natural antibiotics. They have antimicrobial properties, meaning they can inhibit the growth of bacteria and fungi.
So it's like giving the plant a dose of its own medicine
Right.
to fight off infections.
Exactly.
Wow, so it's a multi-pronged defense strategy.
It is.
The ZNONPs are directly attacking pathogens, boosting the plant's immune system, and even stimulating the production of natural antibiotics.
That's right.
That's incredible. But what about those environmental stresses we talked about?
Yes.
Like drought, heat, and salinity? How do ZNONPs help plants cope with those?
Those are tough challenges.
Yeah.
But remember those reactive oxygen species, or ROS, we talked about? They play a fascinating role here, too.
Wait, I thought those ROS were the bad guys.
Yeah.
The ones causing damage in the pathogens.
They can be harmful in large amounts, like uncontrolled sparks causing a fire. But in controlled doses, ROS act as signaling molecules in plants.
Signaling molecule?
Yeah.
What do they signal?
Think of them like alarm bells, warning different parts of the plant that there's trouble brewing.
Oh, okay.
When a plant experiences drought stress, for example, it produces ROS to communicate the danger and trigger defense mechanisms.
So it's like the plant's internal warning system.
Right.
Letting everything know it's time to activate the drought survival plan.
Exactly.
But how do ZNONPs fit into all of this?
They act as fine-tuners,
Oh.
making sure those alarm bells are ringing at just the right volume and reaching the right parts of the plant.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's all about optimizing the plant's response to stress, whether it's drought, heat, or salinity.
So it's not necessarily about increasing or decreasing ROS,
Right.
but rather making sure the plant's internal communication system is working perfectly.
That's a great way to put it.
That's pretty amazing. But what about heavy metals?
Oh.
Those are super toxic, right? How do ZNONPs tackle that problem?
Imagine ZNONPs as tiny magnets attracting and binding to heavy metals in the soil.
Okay.
They basically trap those toxins, preventing them from being taken up by the plants.
So they're acting as a protective barrier,
Yeah.
keeping those heavy metals away from the plant's delicate roots.
Right.
That's pretty ingenious.
It is, and what's even more remarkable is that while they're blocking those harmful heavy metals,
Okay.
ZNONPs can actually enhance the uptake of essential nutrients like zinc and iron.
Hold on, they're blocking the bad stuff while boosting the good stuff.
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
It's still not fully understood, but it seems like ZNONPs might be helping plants become more selective about what they absorb from the soil.
Okay.
They might even be creating a more favorable environment for beneficial microbes that help with nutrient uptake.
It's like they're turning the soil into a nutrient-rich oasis,
Right.
even if it's contaminated with heavy metals.
Mm-hmm.
This is all so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
It's like we're giving plants a whole new set of tools to not only survive, but thrive in a world with increasing challenges.
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
We've covered how ZNONPs tackle pests, diseases, and even harsh environmental conditions.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away with all the amazing benefits, we need to address the elephant in the room, safety.
We've been talking about all the amazing things ZNONPs can do for plants, but like you said, we need to talk about safety.
Absolutely. Any new technology, especially one that interacts with living systems and our food supply, needs to be carefully evaluated for potential risks.
Right.
That's just responsible innovation.
Okay, so what are some of the concerns that scientists are investigating when it comes to ZNONPs?
One of the big ones is the potential for these nanoparticles to build up in the soil.
Okay.
If we keep applying them year after year, could they reach levels that start to disrupt the natural balance of the soil ecosystem?
That makes sense. We've talked about how important soil health is with all those microbes and fungi that make the underground world tick.
Right.
We don't want to mess with that delicate balance, right?
Right, think of it this way. Soil is like a city
Okay.
with a complex web of interactions between its inhabitants. We don't want to introduce something that disrupts those interactions and throws the whole city into chaos.
So what kind of research is being done to assess these risks?
Scientists are doing all sorts of cool experiments.
Like what?
They're looking at how ZNONPs affect the diversity and activity of soil microorganisms,
Right.
how they influence nutrient cycles, and even how they might change the physical structure of the soil.
It sounds like a lot of detective work figuring out how these nanoparticles behave in the soil.
It is. They're also investigating whether ZNONPs can be transported to groundwater or other parts of the environment,
Oh, yeah.
and whether they interact with other chemicals in the soil, potentially creating new compounds with unknown effects.
Wow, it's a whole field of research in itself.
It is.
Okay, so we're looking at the impact on the soil ecosystem.
Yeah.
But what about the food we eat? If ZNONPs are being used on crops, could they end up in our food and potentially cause problems?
That's another important area of research. And scientists are taking it very seriously.
Okay.
They're investigating how ZNO-NPs are absorbed,
Mm-hmm.
metabolized, and excreted by animals and humans.
Okay.
They're looking at any signs of toxicity and doing long-term studies to assess potential health effects.
So it's kind of like testing a new medicine,
Right.
making sure it's safe and effective before it's widely used.
Exactly. And just like with medicine, the dosage matters.
That makes sense.
Scientists are also studying how the concentration of ZNO-NPs in soil affects their uptake by plants,
Great.
and whether there are safe levels that can be used without causing harm.
That's reassuring to know that these studies are being conducted.
Yeah.
But are there any rules in place right now about how ZNO-MPs can be used in agriculture?
The regulatory landscape is still evolving,
Okay.
but many countries are starting to develop guidelines for nanomaterials in agriculture. They're figuring out things like labeling requirements, risk assessment protocols, environmental monitoring procedures.
So it's like creating a rule book for using this new technology safely and responsibly.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
where we can maximize the benefits of ZNO-MPs for agriculture
Right.
while minimizing any potential risk.
Okay, so we've got scientists doing research, regulators developing guidelines, but what can farmers and consumers do to make sure we're using this technology wisely?
For farmers, it's all about staying informed.
Okay.
They need to keep up with the latest research findings, follow best practices for application, and carefully consider things like soil type application rates and potential environmental impacts.
It's about using these nanoparticles with care and precision, not just spraying them around willy-nilly.
Exactly. And for consumers,
Yeah.
they can support sustainable agriculture by choosing products from farmers who are committed to environmental stewardship and responsible use of new technologies.
So look for labels or certifications that indicate sustainable practices.
Yeah.
Vote with our dollars, so to speak.
You got it. Ultimately, it's a shared responsibility.
That's a good point.
Scientists, regulators, farmers, and consumers all need to work together
Yeah.
to ensure that nanotechnology is used in a way that benefits both people and the planet.
This has been an amazing deep dive. We've gone from tiny particles to complex mechanisms,
It has.
from fighting pests to protecting the environment.
That's right.
It's clear that ZNO-NPs have the potential to revolutionize agriculture, but like with any powerful tool, we need to use it wisely.
I agree. It's been a fascinating exploration, and I think the key takeaway is that we're still at the beginning of this nanotechnology journey.
Yeah.
There's so much more to learn, but by fostering collaboration, supporting responsible research, and promoting transparency,
Right.
we can harness the power of these tiny particles to create a healthier and more sustainable food system for everyone.
That's an inspiring thought. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of ZNO-NPs.
My pleasure.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling energized and ready to learn even more.
Me too.
Until next time, keep those coffee cups filled with curiosity and those minds open to the wonders of science.